Order. Business question, Angela Eagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the Leader of the House would give us business for next week.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, before I give the business of the House, I think it might be appropriate, and I hope it will be a view shared by all sides of the House, for us to express our solidarity and goodwill for the Parliament in Kabul after the dreadful terrorist attack this week. We express all sympathies to those affected. It is a matter of great dismay to me when a Parliament, and a democratically elected Parliament, is a target in this way. Mr. Speaker, the business for next week, on Monday the 29th of June, consideration in Committee of the Scotland Bill, Day 2. Tuesday the 30th of June is Day 3 of the consideration in Committee of the Scotland Bill. On Wednesday the 1st of July, we will have an opposition day on a subject to be announced. Thursday the 2nd of July, there will be a general debate on Britain and international security. On Friday the 3rd of July, the House will not be sitting. And the provisional business for the week commencing the 6th of July will include, on Monday the 6th, the conclusion of consideration in Committee of the Scotland Bill. On Tuesday the 7th of July, there will be a further opposition day. On Wednesday the 8th of July, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, will deliver his budget statement. And on Thursday the 9th of July, there will be a continuation of the budget debate. On Friday the 10th of July, the House will not be sitting.
Angela Eagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I associate myself with the leaders' commiserations and good thoughts to those who were caught up in the awful events in the Parliament in Kabul. Mr. Speaker, there's just over a year and a half until the BBC's charter runs out, but the government still haven't set out a timetable or a plan for this renewal. After the Prime Minister's election threat to close down the BBC, and given the last charter renewal process began 3 years before the charter expired, could the leader say when and how the House will be kept informed of the progress on this important issue? Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, the Equality and Human Rights Commission revealed that a staggering 88% of lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people had experienced some form of hate crime, and 35,000 of these cases go unreported every year. As I dust off my pink Stetson, ready to join the LGBT community pride, does the Leader of the House agree that we need to redouble our efforts to root out prejudice and discrimination at home and abroad? And does he agree with me that the Foreign Secretary's decision to ban the pride flag from being flown at UK embassies around the world sends exactly the wrong signal? Mr. Speaker, later today, EU leaders will meet in Brussels. The Prime Minister has briefed that it's all about his renegotiation, but I read this morning that one senior EU diplomat has said that the discussion will be cursory, so I thought I'd take a look at the agenda. I can see items on migration, on terrorism, on jobs, growth and competitiveness, and squeezed in, just before the end, above the adoption of the minutes of the last meeting, is our Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, his backbenchers have got him on the run. His tour of European capitals has been an object lesson in how to lose friends and alienate people. One Slovak official saying he's not the brightest spark in terms of getting what he wants. His approach is making him irrelevant. But not to worry, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has come up with a cunning plan. Instead of successful renegotiation, he's apparently decided to rebrand our membership of the EU by calling us associate members. Given that the Right Honourable Member for North Somerset has already indicated that Eurosceptics, like the Leader of the House, will resign before the referendum, perhaps the Prime Minister should consider offering his Cabinet associate membership to hold his government together. Mr. Speaker, this government really does say one thing and do another. Just last year they promised more disabled people would be in work. Now we know that fewer than 1 in 10 disabled people on the work programme have actually found a job. Before the last election, they claimed they'd exceeded their own target for selling off government land for house building. But now we know that they were counting land sold off from 1997. And on Monday, the Prime Minister claimed he'd saved £1.2 billion through the Troubled Families programme, but within minutes, the National Institute of Economic and Social Research had dismissed his comments as pure, unadulterated fiction. So can we have a debate in government time on the Tory parallel universe where you can say something, do the complete opposite and hope nobody will notice? Mr Speaker, it's now 3 months since the Right Honourable Member for Surrey Heath ceased being Chief Whip. I'd be missing him, Mr Speaker, if he'd ever bothered turning up. So I thought I'd take a look at what he'd been up to in the Ministry of Justice. Mr Speaker, after a period of uncharacteristic silence, he sprung suddenly to life and issued a detailed guide on grammar for his civil servants. His rules include never using the word impact and avoiding, and I'm quoting, anything too pompous. I wonder who on earth he has in mind, Mr Speaker. Over at his old department, I noticed that the Secretary of State for Education has also been tackling the big issues. She's appointed a new low-level bad behaviour czar, presumably to help deal with Tory Eurosceptics. Mr Speaker, I feel compelled, finally, to mention the developing drama in the Liberal Democrat leadership race. Only they could manage to have a split when they've got 8 MPs. This week, the Right Honourable Member for North Norfolk had to apologise after his activists were caught discrediting his rival by calling round the party's entire membership, which can't have taken very long, Mr Speaker. Although he earned the endorsement of boxer Frank Bruno, which means at least he's got one big hitter.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Honourable Lady began with a question about the BBC. Of course, the next 18 months will be an important period in deciding how the future of the BBC will be shaped. We have a new Secretary of State, a very welcome appointment to Secretary of State, who has only been in post a few weeks. He has already started work on this important issue, and of course, the House will be updated in due course about progress on that front. On the question of hate crime, can I say I absolutely agree with her. I think it's not simply a matter of those in the LGBT community, but actually in other parts of our society, hate crime is wholly unacceptable in whatever form, whether it's sex, colour, creed, whatever. And all of us in this House should deprecate it, and we should always seek to ensure that our authorities deal with it in the appropriate way. And I think, I hear her comments about flags. She will no doubt raise that question also with the Foreign Secretary. I think there are many countries around the world which need to change their approach to the issue of gay rights, and I very much hope that they will do so. On Europe, well, Mr Speaker, let's be clear. What I hope and believe will come out of the European Summit is a historic agreement with our European partners to renegotiate our membership of the European Union. That is a major step forward. And I have to say I listened with interest to the party opposite, who seem to waver in the wind on this issue. They opposed a referendum, now they support a referendum. They seem to support some form of renegotiation, but don't appear to believe that any change is necessary to our relationship with the European Union. When they have a clear policy, when they have a clear view about what our relationship should be, then perhaps we'll start to listen to them and take them seriously. But right now, Mr Speaker, we will not do so. On the employment front, well, I'm sorry to say to the Honourable Lady that the work programme has been a great success. It has led to a massive drop in the number of long-term unemployed in this country. This government has a fantastic, and indeed I would say the coalition government as well, had a fantastic record on employment. We've seen a huge increase in the number of people in work to record levels. We've seen a massive drop in unemployment and a very welcome increase in the number of disabled people in work. Mr Speaker, she mentioned the issue of guidelines issued by ministers, in this particular case on grammar. All I would say to her is I would rather have a former Education Secretary issuing guidance to his correspondence team about how best to phrase letters from his department than to have a Chief Secretary to the Treasury issuing instructions to his civil servants about how to make his coffee. And I guess finally, Mr Speaker, it would be wrong to pass by without a quick glimpse at the Labour leadership contest this week. I have, as usual, been taking a look to see what's been happening. I had a look at the website of the Wallasey Labour Party. Where else to get an insight into what's going on? And there, on the front page, I found an article with the headline, "The Labour leadership candidates are awful." Enough said.
Sir David Amess.
Would my right honourable friend find time for a debate on burial and cremation services, as government burial funds are now keeping pace with the increasing costs of making dignified funeral arrangements?
Well, Mr Speaker, my honourable friend raises an important point. Of course, the government provides through the current system nearly £50 million a year of support for people going through the trauma of bereavement. I would say to him that I would encourage him to look to either bring forward a debate in this House or to raise it in oral questions, and I know ministers will listen sensitively to the points that he's raising.
Speak Wishart.
Mr Speaker, and can I thank the Leader of the House for announcing the business for next week and join him in his comments about the Parliament in Kabul, and I think it was well made by the Leader of the House. So, Mr Speaker, we return to the Scotland Bill next week, and we've got 2 days of further amendments to try and improve this bill and return it to the principles of the Smith Commission, which the Devolution Committee in the Scottish Parliament believes hasn't been met, and neither now is the House of Commons Library, as my honourable friend from Murray said to the Prime Minister yesterday. So can we have the Secretary of State with the Scotland Office team coming to this House on Monday and Tuesday in a much more accommodating mood to ensure that the principles of Smith have met, and the Leader of the House better not even be thinking about amending the Scotland Bill in the House of Lords, the unelected House of Lords, because the House of Lords, I can tell him, has never been held in such contempt by the Scottish people, who see it nothing other than the repository for the donors and cronies of the UK parties. So it must be amended here. Can I have his assurance that any amendments, important amendments to the Scotland Bill, will be made in the elected chamber of the House of Commons, not in that bloated, ermine-coated, absurd legislature down the corridor there. And I see we've got a debate, Mr Speaker, next week on English votes for English laws as it applies to North Wales by the Honourable Member for Innismore, who I can't see in his place. And maybe we will at last get some answers to some questions about English votes for English laws, because he has singularly failed to answer one parliamentary question on this issue yet. Now, we've got 3 weeks left, Mr Speaker, before the end of the session. Is he going to be big in his plans here? Is he going to start answering any questions? He's going to have to turn up to a debate on Wednesday and answer some questions. So can we hear some more about English votes for English laws, how it will affect my friends here, Mr Speaker, and you, Mr Speaker, which will place you in the most invidious political position in this House? We need some answers to these questions. And lastly, Mr Speaker, the Scottish schools go on holiday next week. We could have a recess for almost 3 months, but yet we cannot have the recess arrangements to meet the school holidays in a large part of the United Kingdom. Now, many of my honourable friends have young children, Mr Speaker, and where it's great that English members will get to spend the whole recess period in their constituencies, my honourable friends won't get to do that. We're off for almost 3 months. Surely, by the wit of this House, we could design a recess period that will cover that. Can I make a suggestion, Mr Speaker? Let's do away with the Daily Mail fortnight in September. Let's do away with the conference recess. Have the recess period covering all the school holidays. Return here like everybody else in the country does after the August bank holiday. Surely that makes sense for everybody, Mr Speaker, and I hope the Leader of the House will look at that suggestion.
Well, Mr Speaker, first of all on the Scotland Bill, I just can only reiterate it is this government's position that we are fulfilling our obligation and implementing the Smith Commission's report in the Scotland Bill. He will have plenty of opportunities to bring forward his own amendments if he chooses to do so, to question Scottish Office ministers about the content of that bill. But as the Prime Minister said very clearly yesterday in Prime Minister's question time, we are fulfilling our obligation to the Scottish people when we set out for them a package of devolution. And when they looked at that, they chose to stay within the United Kingdom, and I'm very grateful that they did. We are fulfilling the agreement we made at that time. That is what the Scotland Bill does. On English votes for English laws, I can only reiterate that we will bring forward our proposal shortly. But I think my question for both the parties opposite, this is a measure they should support. The Labour Party, because it no longer has a presence in Scotland, and it should understand the need for a fairness in the devolution settlement in this country, and the Scottish Nationalists, because they themselves, as champions of devolution, should also understand the need for fairness. And I hope when I do bring forward the proposals shortly, they will welcome them and see them as an important part of solidifying our constitutional arrangements. On the recess arrangements, look, I do understand the point the honourable gentleman is making, and of course the Chief Whip and I will always think carefully about how we best structure the parliamentary calendar. It is not always easy to provide a solution for all options, but we will always seek to try to make this place as child and family friendly as we possibly can. And finally, Mr Speaker, I have to report to the House that whilst there are still some terrible conflicts around the world where we hope to see great resolution, it does appear that one close to home has indeed been resolved, and that the morning race for the benches over there has stopped. Peace has broken out, and agreement has been reached between the two parties on where they will all sit in future. That is good news for this House, though perhaps bad news for the bookmakers.
Order. As I mentioned earlier, a statement by the Secretary of State for Transport will follow these exchanges, and thereafter there is to be a very well-subscribed debate. Therefore, there is a premium upon brevity. I'm looking for single, short, supplementary questions, preferably without preamble, and the Secretary of State, or rather the Leader of the House's characteristically pithy replies. Mr. Matt Warman.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday in Westminster Hall I proposed a very well-attended debate on superfast broadband. Does the Leader of the House agree with me that this is a matter that's vitally important to all of our constituents and should be debated more fully?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would commend my honourable friend on bringing forward the debate. I do understand it was very, very well attended. We, of course, now have established the new committee structure. The Backbench Business Committee will be able to meet shortly, and I would encourage him to talk to the committee members with a view to trying to secure one of the backbench days for that very purpose.
Clive Efford.
Can we have a debate on the role of the National Crime Agency in preventing harm to children? I've been raising my concerns about a substance called the miracle mineral solution, which is being promoted particularly to parents of children with autism as a cure for autism. And I've been asking the National Crime Agency why this doesn't represent a direct threat to harm children. It's being promoted as something that we can give them orally in a baby's bottle or even as an enema. Can we have a debate to ensure that the National Crime Agency is on top of issues like this?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman raises a very important point. I wasn't aware of the particular substance. We have, of course, got Home Office questions on Monday week, and I hope he'll take advantage of the opportunity to raise this issue with Home Office ministers. It's clearly a matter we should take very seriously.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have a pink T-shirt or indeed even the use of a pink bus, but, Mr. Speaker, this weekend, hundreds of thousands of people will be celebrating the diversity and equality that we all cherish in this country. Unfortunately, around 80 countries, people cannot do that where it is illegal. And, Mr. Speaker, few people have done more to promote LGBT rights than yourself in this Parliament. Would the Leader please have a word with the Foreign Secretary about the displaying of the rainbow flag over the Foreign Office and High Commissions and embassies throughout the world? It will send such an important signal that we stand by the side of those who are oppressed, and indeed, in some cases, those who fear death for the crime of being born gay.
Well, Mr. Speaker, and as the honourable lady said, I'm very happy to communicate the issue to my right honourable friend. I am very sympathetic to the work that has been done to address this issue around the world. As I said earlier, it is shocking that many countries still regard homosexuality as illegal. It is something we should all in this House work to end.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you. Could we have an urgent debate on the government plans to sell off a majority stake in the Green Investment Bank, a move that will damage investor confidence, set back the low-carbon economy and, crucially, undermine the very reason for setting up the bank, which was precisely to leave a private investment by de-risking it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not surprised to hear the honourable lady's concerns, given the views I know that she has, but my belief is that it is far better for an organisation like the Green Investment Bank to be able to stand on its own 2 feet if it can function as an effective organisation without a need to have taxpayer support. That is surely a good thing. And it is a sign that actually investment in green business, green industries and green technologies is becoming more and more mainstream in the investment world.
Jack Lepresti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my honourable friend find time for a debate about the provision of healthcare across South Gloucestershire, especially the long-awaited and much-anticipated community hospital on the Perthshire hospital site, which has just been delayed and going on for long enough?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I commend my honourable friend for being such a powerful advocate for his constituency? I know he has campaigned on this issue for a long time. I know my colleagues in the Department of Health will have heard what he said. Of course, a lot of this is now down to local decision-making, and so the influence that he has locally will play a big part in this. But, of course, health questions is in 10 days' time, and he'll have the opportunity to restate that point then.
Mike Gapes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we see the dangerous situation in Kobani in Syria, isn't it time we had a full debate in this House about our strategy towards Syria and the region and what we can be doing to help the brave Kurdish fighters who are fighting against the horrible Daesh cult and its misogynist, homophobic, murderous policies?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I first of all endorse the honourable gentleman's concerns about the dreadful things happening in parts of Iraq and Syria. It is absolutely right and proper that the international community should stand against this, should be supportive of those who are resisting that terrible regime, and of course we are playing our part as a nation in doing so. One of the reasons we are having next Thursday, Mr. Speaker, a debate on international affairs is because over the last few weeks I've listened carefully to the comments made by members on both sides of the House on the need for this and similar issues to be debated, and that opportunity will be there this time next week.
Mr. Philip Hollowbone.
Whilst investigatory powers and Britain and international security are undoubtedly important topics, it is also important that this House debate what everybody else is talking about in the country. And night after night on our television screens, the wave of human misery coming to our shores from the Middle East and North Africa and the problems being caused at Calais is what everybody is talking about and concerned about. So can we have a full day's debate on the floor of the House about Britain's immigration policy and how we're going to tackle both legal immigration being too high and illegal immigration being too high?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do recognise this is a matter of very great concern to the public and indeed to the government, and he will be aware that my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, was in this House yesterday addressing the issue. In relation to what's happening in the Mediterranean, what I would say is that both the issue in Iraq and Syria and also the crisis in the Mediterranean were two of the key reasons for ensuring the next Thursday is indeed a full day's debate, and I hope my honourable friend will take advantage of that to discuss what I think we all regard as being a crucially important issue and what is happening in North Africa and the Mediterranean, which is frankly shocking.
Kirsten Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if I could ask the Leader of the House if we can have a statement on what steps are being taken to prevent companies funded by the Department for International Development from pursuing policies and contract terms which lead to systemic food wastage.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady is raising an important point. I will make sure her concerns are passed to the Department of International Development. I would suggest that she looks perhaps to bring an International Development Minister to the House through an adjournment debate to raise the issue directly. I know she will continue to ask questions about it.
Paul Scully.
At their school assembly yesterday, the pupils at Cheam Park Farm Junior School gave me several messages in support of the Send My Friend to School campaign. Can we have a debate to discuss how this government can help in their objective of making free education available to more children around the world?
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would commend the teachers at Cheam Park Primary for the work they're doing in raising awareness and helping their pupils to raise their concerns. What I would say to him is that he can, I think, look those pupils in the eye and say that this government has an excellent record in providing financial support through our international aid budget to those parts of the world where young people don't have adequate access to education and indeed adequate access to other basic needs in life like clean food and water. So we are doing everything we can internationally to help the development of those communities, and those young people should feel proud to be part of a country that's doing its bit in the world.
Don Blinkinsop.
Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago my constituent used Safestyle UK to fit windows throughout her property. 2 years on, those windows still rattle, they still leak water, and Safestyle UK deny any responsibility. Can we have a debate in this House about consumer rights and how we can improve consumer rights so people aren't being ripped off by cowboys?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman is, I think, performing one of the most important functions that a constituency member of Parliament can do, which is to put pressure on organisations that are simply not delivering for the people we represent. I'm sure him merely having raised the issue today will have stirred some people outside. He will have another opportunity on Tuesday in business questions. I hope he will continue to do so. It's right and proper we should put pressure on organisations that fail to deliver for our constituents.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Mr. Speaker, when the Leader of the House referred to the European Council summit and the fact that he expected the Prime Minister to report back that the European Union had agreed to the fundamental reforms, I think I saw, Mr. Speaker, the first thing in 10 years. I saw some flying pigs looping and laughing at the same time. I don't know if you caught that, but could the Leader of the House confirm that we will have a statement from the Prime Minister on Monday about the European Council?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't necessarily commenting on the outcome of the negotiations, merely that the negotiations are starting. He will form his own view about whether there are flying pigs around or not, but I can assure him that there will be a statement on Monday. The Prime Minister will be before this House and will be able to take questions in detail about this, but also about the issue in the Mediterranean my honourable friend from Kettering made reference to a moment ago.
Rachel Maskell.
This week, North Yorkshire Police held a summit around the sharp increase in antisocial behaviour in York City Centre at weekends, fuelled by excess drinking. When will this House have an opportunity to debate the increase on police levels when linked with licensing legislation to ensure that city centres can be safe, family-friendly and good for business?
Well, Mr Speaker, of course, one of the things that we on this side have always believed is that it was a mistake for the last Labour government to go as far as it did down the road towards all-night drinking. I think it did have an effect on antisocial behaviour. It did put extra pressure on police. I think we have taken a number of measures since that will help contribute to easing that problem. But of course, she will always have the opportunity to raise at Home Office questions through the adjournment debate system, concerns related to her constituency, where she feels the existing powers don't go far enough.
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Following the brouhaha that there has been over the Crown Estates, the Scotland Bill and the Sovereign Grant Act, will my right honourable friend make time available for a debate to allow our friends in the Scottish National Party to reaffirm their loyalty to our and their sovereign?
Well, Mr Speaker, I note the welcome nods from the members of the Scottish National Party. I have to say I'm very glad to see that the First Minister this morning has clarified the situation in no uncertain terms. I think that we, on all sides of this House and in all parts of the United Kingdom, should be absolutely proud of our monarch. We value her. We are amazingly grateful to her for everything she has done for us. And the fact that she is in Germany today, representing this country again, is just an example of how well served we are by her and by our royal family.
Graham Morris.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Leader of the House has announced that next Thursday we'll have a debate on international affairs in government time. Could I suggest that the House should have the opportunity to discuss some domestic issues, notably the proposed £200 million cut in public health budgets, 3.6 million of which is to be cut from my area, Durham County Council? It flies in the face of all the evidence of expert opinion, will damage preventative health care and is extremely short term. Members all across the country would like to have an opportunity to discuss it.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'd simply remind the honourable gentleman that we, both in coalition and in government, have continued to increase funding for healthcare, somewhat against the wishes of the Shadow Health Secretary, who argued that we should be reducing funding for healthcare and that it would be irresponsible to continue to increase it in the way we have. So I'm very happy with our record on this.
John Glenn.
My constituent Mohammed Khalifa Aissa is currently studying in Salisbury on a visitor visa. There are no flights back to Libya because of the turmoil, and my constituent is stranded here. The UK Border Agency expects him to travel to another country to reapply for a visa. Will the Leader of the House make time for a debate on our immigration rules in the light of this impractical and unrealistic advice that he's received?
Well, Mr Speaker, I do understand the difficulty that his constituent faces, given the very difficult situation in Libya. My advice to him is to approach the Minister directly. I know that ministers try to be flexible when there are exceptional circumstances, though, of course, given the immigration pressures upon us, they have to be pretty rigid in upholding the rules as we have them. Otherwise, we would be opening the door to very large numbers of other people who would wish to come here.
Liz McInnes.
Mr Speaker. Could we have a statement on why the Ministry of Justice is still paying G4S and Serco millions of pounds every month for supplying electronic tagging equipment, more than a year after both companies were barred from running the contract?
Well, Mr Speaker, of course, G4S and Serco don't run the contracts, Capita do.
Dr Tania Mathias.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With the Davis Commission about to report any day, will the Leader of the House tell us if the Government plans to have a debate on the Commission's findings before the summer recess and if the Government will put them to a vote?
Well, Mr Speaker, I assure my honourable friend that the Secretary of State for Transport is well aware of how important an issue this is in this House. Once the report is received by Government, he will certainly come to this House. He will certainly take questions before deciding how to proceed beyond that.
Thomas Simmons.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The rollout of universal credit
has begun in my constituency of Torvine, with it being available to single new claimants since April. This has enormous implication for very vulnerable people, many of whom do not have access to the internet and now have to get used to managing money in a different way. Will the Leader of the House find time for a debate on access to universal credit for the most vulnerable people in our society?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite's policy has been, I think, to be supportive of the universal credit, so I'm not sure where his comment fits in with that. The reality is that the universal credit creates a new structure which means that people are better off in work than sitting at home on benefits doing nothing. And if people are going to get away from the benefits environment which many of them live in and get into the workplace, which is something we all want, they of course are going to need to have knowledge of, access, the ability to use technology, which is available through job centres, through public libraries and other facilities. So I think we've got this absolutely right, and I think universal credit will make a transformational difference to people's lives.
Greg Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency, we've got a growing problem of HGV drivers parking overnight on industrial parks and also neighbouring residential areas such as Coles Hill. And this is predominantly drivers from Eastern European countries. Hams Hall Distribution Centre has seen up to 70 trailers per night, and as a result there's an increase in accidents and antisocial behaviour. Can I ask my right honourable friend if we can have an urgent debate to be heard on the supply and adequate lorry parks, and also that consideration is given when granting planning on industrial parks that lorry...
Well, Mr. Speaker, by coincidence, the Secretary of State for Transport has just walked into the chamber and so will have heard my honourable friend's remarks. I do understand the nature of the challenge. I do think there are things that could be done to address it. I would personally like to see more of the motorway service station providers catering for this kind of need, which is clearly there. It is not something that should be simply imposed upon local communities and local estates, and I know the Transport Department will be happy to listen to his comments.
Steve McCabe.
Mr. Speaker, in the last Parliament, the Government established at considerable cost the post of Police and Crime Commissioners, which they argued was vital for democratic accountability. Now they are to be subsumed in the office of Metro Mayors, who will be imposed by the local government secretary with an additional precept, whether local people want it or not. Should we have a debate on what the government means by democratic accountability?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think Police and Crime Commissioners have made a real difference in providing a focal point for those concerned about local policing. Of course, we already have the position in London where the two posts are combined. What's interesting is, I know the party opposite has always been very sceptical about police and crime commissioners, but that doesn't seem to have stopped a rather large number of former Labour members of Parliament standing as police and crime commissioners.
Sir Andrew Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Exactly a year ago today, at Prime Minister's Questions, I raised the tragic case of 17-year-old James Goodship, who had tragically drowned just days before in Lake Burwain in my constituency. As this week is Drowning Prevention Week, can we have a debate on how we can reduce the rate of drownings and such tragedies across the UK?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it was, of course, a tragic event, and our sympathies are still very much with his family. And I would pay tribute to my honourable friend for taking up the mantle of this issue of building awareness, of working intensively within Parliament to raise awareness of the risks. I know his comments will be heard both in this place and outside, and I would suggest to him that it may be a valuable opportunity to bring forward in a German debate, to discuss the issue with ministers and to allow other members of Parliament who perhaps have experienced similar tragedies in their constituencies to contribute to the debate.
Break.
I have received many emails about the case of Andagachu Tsege, and I suspect the leader has, and probably every member of the House has. He is a British man held under a death sentence and in Communicado detention in Ethiopia. Has the Leader of the House had any requests from the FCO to come and debate the matter, and if he hasn't, would he follow it up with FCO ministers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have also had, I suspect many of us had, a number of emails. I deprecate the death penalty wherever it is in place around the world. I've always opposed it. I oppose it in this case. It's clearly a worrying case. And I will certainly pass on the concerns to the Foreign Office so that they're aware how many members have had constituents raise these concerns with them.
Tom Pursglove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Steel production is a crucial employer in Corby, and I know that members on all sides, as Vice Chairman of the APPG, want to come together to secure the future of the industry. Could we have a debate in government time on carbon taxation and the steel industry with the Treasury Minister at the dispatch box?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is enormously important that we provide support to key industries like steel. It is an important part of the local economy, both in my honourable friend's constituency, but also in many other parts of this country. We do have ministers from the business department before this House next week. I hope he will take the opportunity to raise the same concerns with them. Of course, we have a challenge ahead in tackling climate change and in bringing down carbon emissions. But we've also got to be smart when it comes to looking after our own industries.
Mrs. Mary Glindon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, the Leader of the House kindly offered to pass on a request to the Prime Minister to meet with Muscular Dystrophy UK and 6 young boys with Duchenne muscular dystrophy who need Translarna. The decision on the drug is imminent, but the boys have heard nothing. Could the Leader of the House kindly do something to hasten the response from number 10?
I will duly apply. Now, of course, the Prime Minister is well aware of the issue because, as I said previously, he met one of the boys back in January. But, of course, I will make sure that message is passed to number 10 for her.
Where's Streeting?
Mr. Speaker, at a meeting I hosted this morning with higher education sector leaders, concern was once again raised about the damaging impact that the inclusion of students in the government's net migration cap is having on one of our most important export industries. Could the Leader of the House arrange a debate on this, because there is concern about this policy on all sides of the House and beyond?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do regard it as an anomaly that students are contained in some of our migration figures, but that is not a matter for this country. It's something that's set by international statisticians and international statistical rules. We have a very large number of students who come to this country. We have taken appropriate steps to make sure that those who do come here are legitimate. That is right and proper. We have a thriving higher education sector in this area, but we've also got to have a system that is careful in ensuring that the people who do come here should be here.
Kate Green.
Mr. Speaker, Joseph Cleaven's son, an SME based in Stretford in my constituency, which has supplied the MOD for many years, report chaotic tendering practices, onerous timescales and contracts being extended or awarded without proper competition. This is neither good for the business nor for the taxpayer. May we have a debate in government time on defence procurement?
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course we will have defence questions again early in July, so I would encourage her to raise the issue with ministers at that point, but I will make sure that I pass on her concerns on behalf of her constituent company to my colleagues at the Ministry of Defence after this business questions.
Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the course of the Same-Sex Marriage Act, the Reverend Melvin Tinker in Hull told me that if I supported it, he'd instruct his congregation not to vote for me. Might have had something to do with the fact my majority went from 641 to 12,899. However, this weekend, the Reverend Tinker has equated homosexuality in the same category as paedophilia. Can we please have a debate in government time about the responsibilities of the established Church of England around community cohesion and not inciting crimes of hate?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, let's be absolutely clear. There is absolutely no connection whatsoever between homosexuality and paedophilia. Paedophilia is a crime. Homosexuality is a reality of our society. It is something that we have moved to support through same-sex marriage and through other changes in recent years, and it is never acceptable to equate the two. What I would also say is, of course, and we were during the passage of the Same-Sex Marriage Act, it is important to be sensitive about these issues, particularly in relation to those people with strong religious views, and we are and we should be, but there is never any justification for equating the two.
Misguided Reverend is obviously rather a blinkered fellow, to put it mildly. Conor McGinn.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. It was announced yesterday that my local authority in St Helens is having a further £23 million cut from its budget, meaning that by 2020 it will have suffered a 50% reduction in funding under this government. Can we have a debate on the crisis in local government funding and the impact on critical services?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is certainly the case that local government has faced budget reductions in recent years, as have many parts of government. It's also been very noticeable across the country how well most councils have adapted to those changes and how well they have sustained their services. If his council, which I have a sneaking suspicion may be a Labour council in St Helens, has not been able to do that, well, maybe it's time for a Conservative council there.